Kia ora. Please excuse my voice. I have got a bit of a voice loss at the end of a school term. It's often the way that school finishes, and all the bugs and things that have sort of been holding off seem to hit all at once. But today I wanted to share with you some of the Central Park paper range and the pack, which is our July feature paper. So this particular pack comes with your normal sheets of paper. It has 4 sheets of cardstock, 3 are white daisy and 1 is a blue. You've got a set of complements, a set of sort of see-through sequins, as well as some red sticker lettering. And in this layout, I'm actually going to scrap lift, or almost but not quite copy, a layout that comes in our seasonal expressions, and this is on page 35. It uses these papers, and it just seemed to tie in nicely the design and the idea of it for this layout that I'm creating of my daughter. So here I'm just showing you that because I don't need the full sheet of white cardstock, I'm going to be putting a square over the middle. I decided to actually carve a piece out of the middle, and from this piece I'm actually going to use it as a backing for my photograph, as a bit of a mat or a frame. So I've decided to measure at, I think it was 8.5, and I just use my trimmer. It's really good with the guides and the measurements all the way around here to be able to line everything up and just cut out the square that you want reasonably neatly and tidily. So just finishing off that last wee strip. So pulling that out there, and you can just see how the middle's completely gone, and I'm just lining up my photograph ready to trim around the edge of that. I could measure it precisely, but that's not my style. In this trimmer there's a little wire guide which helps you to see where the blade is going to slice through the cardstock, so I'm able to have a fairly good eye for what is going to be happening. And I had a look at the different papers with the photo of my daughter on it and what sort of made her stand out. And I decided that the blue, the light blue and the darker blue sort of lines or spots seemed to fit better with that. And so I decided to use the balloon, the hot air balloons, as sort of a backing paper for this sort of square piece that I'm going to pop on. And I've trimmed that down so that it will fit over. Just make sure when you're doing this that you allow room for your adhesive to go right around the edge of the paper, because sometimes if you make it too thin a gap, you don't quite get enough room to do the adhesive work. And just look by eye here, looking at the photo, how much room I need, I trim it down and trim a square off to be able to stick of this blue paper that sort of seems to make the photo pop more than the others do. This particular paper range has a very summery feel. It's not summer here in New Zealand at the moment. It is very much winter. We've had a couple of snow days or late starts to school this term because of snow. However, it's probably a good downtime to scrapbook some of those photos from last summer that we never quite got to. But in saying that, this layout isn't necessarily a summer photo. My daughter in the photo is wearing a polypropylene top just to keep warm as she's on the beach on a little tiny motorbike. This was a few years ago now, and I'm just creating this page as sort of a tribute to the fact that she just got her driver's license just before she headed off to Samoa for a short-term mission trip. However, she hasn't actually had a chance to use her learner's license yet, because she pretty much left 2 days after she sat the license. The law in New Zealand is changing shortly, so that if she didn't get it before she went away, she might not be able to get it as the age is going up, much to my son's disappointment, as he was looking forward to in April next year being able to sit his, but this might be delayed. So I've just pulled out some of the sort of the pocket card type pages, and I am thinking about what would fit and what goes with it. Kind of liked the ideas of arrows and things, in the sense that it's about direction. It's so just thinking about arrows, direction, driving, roads is kind of the thinking I had along with this page as I was putting it together and thinking about it. So the hot air balloons in a way have that symbolism too, about being up and away and getting going and getting moving. So that was why I chose that particular paper at the very back. It just adds a little bit of texture and dimension to the page. So by cutting out these pieces from the complements pack, I'm sort of able to place them and see what I think may or may not work. And so even though I take out bits and pieces, it doesn't necessarily mean they will end up on the finished layout. So these squiggles, for example, I pulled out, but then I decided that they didn't quite work, and I later on went back to that particular piece of the complements and pulled out part of it that would suit. And looking at the sort of semi-translucent paper with "Let's Go" on it, I decided that that would be quite a good piece for the title. And if I had one set of the opaque squiggles with the scalloped edges, I decided to use the translucent one with the spots too. You can see here that the squiggles kind of almost dominated, and so as I was sort of piecing this together and thinking about it, in the end I decided to pull them out because it just doesn't quite add anything to the page, and in some ways it detracts the attention from what's going on. So just playing around with the different pieces as we go, and looking again over at the layout that I'm kind of copying or scrap lifting from page 37 of the Seasonal Expressions book. Close to my heart has got a couple of folders and ideas books and layout design books that you can purchase, but sometimes if we just use the layout examples that are set for us in the different catalogues or idea books, there's so much there already to go on, and collecting these over time, ones that you really like, can be a good way of getting yourself set up for design of different pages. And it just so happened that this particular design fitted really well with both the concept I was doing, but also and it is actually the paper range I'm using here. So getting ready to stick it all down, sometimes it's a bit annoying when you've got it all together and then you go and actually stick it. You sort of have to try and remember where things were and go by eye and visually place it. Some people take a photograph of the layout the way they like it, and they can have that set up beside them as they're working to see where all the pieces were meant to go back together. Alternatively, people also measure and have exact measurements about where they're putting everything. You'll notice when I was sticking down the hot air balloons paper, I was able to go right around the edge with the Tombow tape runner, and that was because I'd allowed a wide enough margin on my cutout piece to be able to stick that down. And by not putting the tape all the way down right near the edge of the papers, it allows room for me to tuck stuff underneath, as I've just done with both of these scalloped pieces. So the zip strip there was from one of the papers, and it just adds another little element down to the bottom without taking away from the photo. I shifted, as I was playing it together, shifted the "Let's Go" over to the left. It just seemed to balance more on the actual layout. So this card, I'm not so sure about it because of the same pattern that it's got of that main piece of blue paper I've used. It somehow, it breaks it up too much, or it just brings that other piece in. It just didn't sit right. And so just playing around with it, had to think, is this working or is this not? And in the end, I went back to the pull apart type cards, and I decided to go with the Happy Day hot air balloon picture that was in the example layout that I am using as a foundation for this page. When you're scrap lifting, it doesn't mean you necessarily have to copy everything exactly. It's about taking the idea and sometimes it's just the composition, and you can use completely different papers. Sometimes it is the papers you're wanting, but you might have different headings, different titles, different focus. For this one, it was the general idea I quite liked, and then just as I put it together more and more, I ended up using more elements of the original layout than I would normally. But that's what you do when you get really good examples to start with. So thinking about the different pieces here, and I'm preparing to cut them out, but I decide that the best direction is actually just to take the cloud off and stick it down. I was looking at the different yay aspects on some of these pull aparts and trying to work out how and where I would do the journaling. And again, while I like that particular little card, it just didn't fit, and the cloud became the ideal piece to stick down so that I could add my journaling to the page. So playing around with this, I end up pretty much copying what's on the layout in the seasonal expression and sticking that down. And I found another yay piece which was on one of the compliments pieces, and I decided to put both pieces of lettering down on the page. So popping out each, the Y, the A and the Y, so that I can stick them up the top, as well as putting the kind of banner down the bottom there that just sort of fills in that gap. And it's quite nice being able to see through and see the little bit of pink and blue underneath, and it just adds a little bit of depth and dimension to the page that was otherwise looking a little bit flat. I did wonder about using the bike. There's also a little moped or scooter that's on the original that kind of fits with what she's doing in this picture, but I decided that there was enough bike on it already and we would just leave it like that. So using the liquid glass to stick this down, this is a really strong adhesive. Possibly could have used the glue, the different glue options, but I decided that the tape runner wasn't the best choice for this, as the chipboard is quite thick and I wanted something that was going to hold it down quite firmly. So these are the little translucent sequins. They're quite nice. They just add a dimension, but yet without taking over because of their translucent nature. They're not too dominating. So the next stop is to add in some journaling, and here we go. Let's go. A layout created using Central Park papers.